Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's EBC video. We're at Centennial Lakes Park here just before sunset, thinking about Mark 1 verses 29 through 39 this week. Now, if you know anything about Centennial Lakes Park, this is a gorgeous area that folks love to rent actually for get-togethers, weddings, and that sort of thing. And we're going to use that to be thinking a little bit about what would you do if you knew that Jesus was coming, and in fact that Jesus was going to bring a whole bunch of people with him someplace, right? You might rent a place like this. You might sort of get everything together and have some catering and sort of throw that big party. Well, if the whole city was coming, you might have to rent a place even bigger than this, right? And if it was the whole city of Minneapolis, well, you might actually even be at Target Field or something like that. But I want you to think about it, at least from the standpoint, if there were a small village where everyone was going to get together and you knew that Jesus was coming, what would you do to get ready? All right, so in Mark 1, we actually are going to see something that's kind of the opposite of that. So we've just had Jesus in the synagogue, and he's just cast out the demon in the synagogue. And he's starting to get a little bit famous as that's happening. And then he goes immediately to Peter and Andrew's place. Right now, when he gets there, we're told that Peter's mother-in-law is sick with a fever. And Jesus takes her by the hand and helps her up, and her fever's gone. And then the Bible says, really specifically, she starts to serve them. I just love this part of the story, right? It's like we're picturing somebody who's been sick and in bed with a fever, and now the fever's gone. And I mean, like, give a woman a minute, right? But instead, the story is, no, she's instantly on top of serving them, right? And it's a couple of different things. One, it's a little bit about the miracle, right? The fact that Jesus heals her in an instant. And so instead of thinking about like, well, I mean, she's on her way to recovery. No, Jesus has healed her. She's ready to go, right? So that's one aspect of it. And then the other aspect is just the thankfulness, the service. Jesus has done something for her, and she's right on top of doing something for all of them. So just a couple of lessons that we can learn there. But then here's what happens. It says that the entire city has gathered outside of Peter and Andrew's place, and Jesus starts healing the sick and all of that sort of stuff, all right? So we know that there's this huge crowd outside that, and now I'm thinking a little bit about it differently here. Think about that moment where we remember that Peter and Andrew dropped their nets and they're gonna follow Jesus, but all of a sudden, the story is getting a lot more complicated, right? Peter and Andrew are at their house, and it's sort of suddenly involving the entire household, and the task that they committed themselves to is starting to look a little bigger all of a sudden, not just for them, but for their families as well. And it's just a reminder, like we talked a moment ago about what would you do if you were planning out having Jesus come. But this isn't the plan, right? This is we said we were gonna follow Jesus, and now it's all going the way it's gonna go. And that's a little bit the lesson for us in our lives too, right? We can plan a lot of things. We maybe even compartmentalize that Sunday morning where here's the time that we're spending with Jesus and worshiping God. But really part of the story is when you're following, you're following. And if something's happening at the house, it's happening at the house, all right? So be thinking about that this week as you're thinking about the things that you do for others, the things that you do in Jesus' name. You may start down that path and suddenly think, man, this is a little more than I bargained for. But this story this week is reminding us to stay the course with those things and to do great works. Even when they're a little more than you thought in the first place, do those great works for Jesus. Everyone, have a great week.